بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سلام على آل ياسين. السلام عليك يا داعي الله ورباني آياته. السلام عليك يا باب الله وديان دينه. السلام عليك يا خليفة الله وناصر حقه. السلام عليك يا حجة الله ودليل إرادته. السلام عليك يا تالي كتاب الله وترجمانه. السلام عليك في آناء ليلك وأطراف نهارك. السلام عليك يا بقية الله في أرضه. السلام عليك يا ميثاق الله الذي أخذه ووكده. السلام عليك يا وعد الله الذي ضمنه. السلام عليك أيها العلم المنسوب والعلم المسبوب والغوث والرحمة الواسعة وعدا غير مكذوب. السلام عليك حين تقوم. السلام عليك حين تقعد. السلام عليك حين تقرأ وتبين. السلام عليك حين تصلي وتقنت. السلام عليك حين تركع وتسجد. السلام عليك حين تهلل وتكبر. السلام عليك حين تحمد وتستغفر. السلام عليك حين تصبح وتمسي. السلام عليك في الليل إذا يغشى والنهار إذا تجلى. السلام عليك أيها الإمام المأمون. السلام عليك أيها المقدم المأمون. السلام عليك بجوامع السلام. أشهدك يا مولاي أني أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأن محمدا عبده ورسوله لا حبيب إلا هو وأهله. وأشهدك يا مولاي أن عليا أمير المؤمنين حجته والحسن حجته والحسين حجته وعلي بن الحسين حجته ومحمد بن علي حجته وجعفر بن محمد حجته وموسى بن جعفر حجته وعلي بن موسى حجته ومحمد بن علي حجته وعلي بن محمد حجته والحسن بن علي حجته وأشهد أنك حجة الله أنتم الأول والآخر وأن رجعتكم حق لا ريب فيها يوم لا ينفع نفسا إيمانها لم تكن آمنت من قبل أو كسبت في إيمانها خيرا وأن الموت حق وأن ناكرا ونكيرا حق وأشهد أن النشر حق والبعث حق وأن الصراط حق والمرصاد حق والميزان حق والحشر حق والحساب حق والجنة والنار حق والوعد والوعيد بهما حق يا مولاي شقي من خالفكم وسعد من أطاعكم فاشهد على ما أشهدتك عليه وأنا ولي لك بريء من عدوك فالحق ما رضيتموه والباطل ما أسخطتموه والمعروف ما أمرتم به والمنكر ما نهيتم عنه فنفسي مؤمنة بالله وحده لا شريك له وبرسوله وبأمير المؤمنين وبكم يا مولاي أولكم وآخركم ونصرتي معدة لكم ومودتي خالصة لكم آمين آمين.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Thank you very much for joining us on this Friday night. I wanted to congratulate to all of you at the birth of Hazrat Sayyida Zainab Salamullah alayha, and also the birth of Prophet Isa alayhi salam. Also, IMIEC would like to recognize the week of nurses that we observed this week. We wanted to take the opportunity to thank all the nurses, frontline healthcare workers who have been sacrificing and helping all the communities in this pandemic. Without further ado, I would like to ask our esteemed speaker, Dr. Takim, to benefit us from the lecture about Christians and Muslim relations. As you know, Dr. Takim is a professor and chair in McMaster University. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Takim. We would love to hear from you.
Thank you for the invitation. As I've said before, if you can't hear me or see me at any time, just let me know, because I cannot tell you, I cannot see myself as such. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين رحمة للعالمين بالقاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فأشارت إليه قالوا كيف نكلم من كان في المهد صبيا قال إني عبد الله أعطاني الكتاب وجعلني نبيا صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوا على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد. Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullah. It's indeed a great pleasure to be here again in front of you to talk about something that we hardly ever talk about, which is the significance and the important role of Isa alayhi salam or Jesus in Islam. And we'll also touch on Hazrat Zainab because we are also marking her wilada today. I know it's a Christmas day and maybe you have other programs also waiting, talking to your family members on Zoom. So we'll try and keep this as short as possible. One or two issues that we need to clarify. Why is it that they celebrate Christmas Day? One thing is for sure, Isa alayhi salam was not born on Christmas Day. I know that may be a bit of a disappointment for many of you, but he was not born on this day. This was actually a pagan holiday. You will recall that you have heard the story of Christians being fed to the lions. What happened was after Isa alayhi salam, Christianity spread primarily through the figure of Paul, the Apostle Paul as he is called. Paul established many churches and communities, spread the word, as he said, to different parts, especially to what is now called Anatolia, Turkey, Greece, Italy, etc. Some of the things that Paul did were very different from what Jesus himself did. In fact, a lot of Christian theology and beliefs has come about not because of Isa, but because of Paul. Let us remember, Isa alayhi salam was born in a Jewish community. He did not speak Hebrew, by the way. His language was Aramaic. He was born in primarily a Jewish community. So these early Christians, although they were actually Jews, but a kind of a subsect of the Jewish community, they observed the kosher diet, which Jews do until today, at least they're Orthodox Jews. And these Jews also observed the Sabbath. They did everything that other Jews did. So Isa alayhi salam affirmed in many ways many of the laws of Musa alayhi salam. But the person who broke away from the Jewish law was not Isa. It was actually Paul. And the reason why Paul did that was this, that as Paul was preaching to non-Christians, what are called non-Jews, what are called Gentiles, Gentiles are those who are not Jews, he realized that the only way to reach out to them was to relax some of the laws that the Jews were observing. To put it differently, the law of Moses was replaced by the love of Jesus, by Paul. So for Paul, as long as you believe in Jesus, you love Jesus, you'll be saved. Now, this is very different from what Jews believe, even more different from what Muslims believe. Because of this, by the way, even today, Islam is closer to Judaism than it is to Christianity. Because Jews have laws, what they call halakha, Muslims have law, what we call sharia. We do believe in the prophets as they do, although of course they do not believe in the last prophet. But in many ways, we keep our understanding of kosher, they keep their understanding of kosher. We do not eat pork, neither do they. So there are a lot of similarities between Judaism and Islam. More similarity between Judaism and Islam than between Judaism and Christianity, or between Islam and Christianity. And Christianity broke off, as I say, because of Paul. Paul felt that in order to spread the word of Jesus, he had to remove and relax many of the laws that Isa himself used to observe. So, for example, circumcision is one of them. So, because the pagans in Greece and in Rome used to observe December 25th as a celebration of their gods. The Christians, in order to blend in with the pagans, they celebrated December 25th not as a holiday for the pagan gods, but as the birthday of Jesus. But in fact, Isa alayhi salam was not born on Christmas Day at all. We do not know exactly when. It's possible that he was born in spring or even in summer. The reason why I mentioned summer, because according to the Quran, as we shall see, Maryam alayhi salam went to the remote part out of Jerusalem, and the Quran instructed her to shake the trees so that the dates would come falling on her. And dates do not traditionally grow in winter. They grow either in spring or during the summer. So by this, at least, we can assume that Isa alayhi salam was born around maybe spring or maybe summer. Even the Orthodox Christians, there are different kinds of Christianity. The Orthodox Christians do not celebrate Christmas Day at all because they believe that Isa, or Jesus as they call him, was born on around the 6th of January. So there are different traditions between them. In order to understand Isa alayhi salam properly, we must also understand the conditions, the surroundings that permeated Isa when he was born. To start with, we have to understand that there were three kinds of Jews at that time. First were what we call the Pharisee Jews that we shall talk about, the Sadducees and the Essenes. Of these three, the most interesting part was the last one, the Essenes. Why? Because the Essenes were those who believed that Jerusalem was corrupt. The temple in Jerusalem, which we also believe in, that Sulaiman built the temple, was corrupt. So therefore, these Essenes, who are also Jews, they went to a place called the Dead Sea. Some of you have heard of the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Dead Sea Scrolls means books. The Dead Sea Scrolls were written by these Essene Jews. They were expecting a Messiah. This is just before the coming of Isa. They were expecting a Messiah who would come and cleanse and purify Jerusalem. Hence, they were called Essenes because they lived in these cliffs very close to the Dead Sea. They lived basically in caves. And these scrolls or books were found in those caves. They were not actually books the way we think of it now. They were just papyrus, papers, sometimes written on skin, and so on, sometimes even on bones. So that was the first group of Jews. The second were the Sadducees, who were kind of more liberal Jews, and the third were the Pharisee Jews. Pharisee Jews were the ones who were living in Jerusalem, who were in many ways corrupting the temple and corrupting some of the practices. They also believed in animal sacrifices, for example. It was in this environment that Isa alayhi salam was born, and we'll talk about the birth of Jesus in a minute or two. But it's important to understand that he was born in that environment in which there was an expectation, at least by the Essene Jews, that a Messiah will be born. Now, we do not believe, at least the Quran doesn't talk about the baptism of Jesus, but he was born at the time also of another prophet called Yahya or John the Baptist. And John the Baptist, by the way, Yahya, was one of these Essene Jews. They were ascetics. They lived in caves, as I mentioned. They shunned away from the corruption of Jerusalem. So Yahya was at the same time as Isa alayhi salam. Interestingly, and what many of people do not know, that the ministry, that the preaching of Isa did not start immediately. The Prophet ﷺ started preaching, our last prophet, at the age of 40. According to most dates that we have, Jesus started preaching when he was 30 years old. And contrary to what we may think, he was not born at the year 0, because you would think that he was born at 0, and then because we used to believe in AD, Anno Domini, after the death and so on. But he was born around 3 BCE or 3 BC, 3 years before 0. And therefore, it's wrong for us to think that he was born at the age of 0, at the time of 0. And he lived, in all probability, again, we have very limited knowledge on this of where Isa alayhi salam actually lived. He did not live in Jerusalem. He lived in a place called Nazareth. Hence, you get the term Nasara. According to many reports, that the Nasara comes from Nazareth. Nazareth is approximately 1.5 hours drive from Jerusalem. And he lived there. And it was there that Maryam alayhi salam got the message that, that the angels talked to her. And also he preached initially in a place called Galilee. Galilee is towards the north of what is now called Israel, what we call Palestine. It was initially he preached there, and he preached many places. So it would be wrong for us to think that Jesus lived most of his life in Jerusalem. He did not. In fact, according to most reports, Isa alayhi salam came to Jerusalem 1 week before what the Jews called Passover. That was the time around Easter, when, at least according to Christians, he was crucified, although we do not believe that he was crucified. Jesus preached for 3 years only, not 23 years, like our prophet who preached for 23 years. Isa preached for 3 years only. It was during the final week that he goes to Jerusalem, and then the rest happens as we hear, according to Jewish and primarily Christian accounts, in Passover in Jerusalem, and then his execution according to Christian belief. But we should focus a little bit about Maryam, because she is a key figure in this whole anecdote of Isa alayhi salam. Interestingly, Maryam is the only woman that is mentioned in the Quran by name. And you may wonder, why is that? Is the Quran against women? No, it's not. Because in Arab culture, until today, in many Arab cultures, you do not mention a woman by name. It's disrespectful. So you say so-and-so, the mother of so-and-so, bint so-and-so, bintul Huda, for example, the mother of Huda. The only reason why Maryam was mentioned by name was because Isa did not have a father. So therefore it was called Isa ibn Maryam. And because Maryam also became a very central figure in the Quran, because the angel spoke to her too. The mother of Maryam, for example, and most reports say that her name was Hannah, is not mentioned in the Quran. Her father is, Maryam's father, called Imran, is mentioned, but not the mother. The mother of Maryam prayed for a child, and she expected a son to be born. إِذْ قَالَتِ الْإِمْرَأَةُ لِإِمْرَانَ, the Quran says, when the wife of Imran said, see, look how the Quran mentions the wife of Imran. It doesn't mention her by name. It doesn't even mention her as the mother of Maryam at this point. إِذْ قَالَتِ الْإِمْرَأَةُ إِمْرَانَ, when the wife of Imran said, Rabbi inni nazartu laka ma fi batni, oh my Lord, I have done another for you of what is in my stomach, muharraran, that I will dedicate the child to you, fataqabbal minni, therefore accept it from me, innaka anta sami'ud du'a, innaka anta sami'ul alim, because you are the most hearing, the most knowing. So Maryam's parents, and especially the mother, was surprised that a girl was born. But because she had made a vow, the mother of Maryam had made a vow that she would dedicate the child to the service of Allah, the child was supposed to be in the temple of Jerusalem. And who would look after her? They cast lots as to who would look after Maryam. And the one whose name came out was Zachariah. Zachariah, or Zacharias in the Christian tradition, was also a prophet, mentioned in the Quran also. And there was a special place in the temple in Jerusalem, the mihrab, where Maryam would pray. And what was so remarkable, and again, this is from the Quran itself, كُلَّمَا دَخَلَ عَلَيْهَا زَكَرِيَّا الْمِحْرَابَ, whenever Zachariah would enter the mihrab, وَجْدَ عِنْدَهَا رِزْقًا, that is Zachariah would find there's food there. And the only person who could see Maryam, who could meet Maryam, was Zakaria. So he was surprised. Qala ya Maryamu anni laki hadha. He said, Maryam, where did this come from? I'm the only one who comes to see you. I didn't bring this food for you. And the response that Maryam gives is very touching and very telling. Qalat huwa min indallah. This is from God. Inna Allah yarzuqu man yasha'u bighayri hisab. Because Allah sustains whoever He wishes without any accountability. Allah is not accountable to anybody. And Zakaria was surprised, but he was also inspired. What that tells us is that when you are pure and pious, gender doesn't matter. Maryam, after all, was not a prominent prophet or anything like that. Simple lady, simple woman. But because of her piety, Allah chose her. She was in the mihrab, Allah would send food for her. And not only that, Allah would talk to her through the angels. But Zakaria is so much inspired by Maryam that Zakaria himself goes and prays to the Lord. Rabbi la tadhirni fardan wa anta khairul warithin. Oh my Lord, do not leave me without a child, because you are the one who is the best of givers of those who inherit. And because of the dua of Zakaria, he also got a son. And the son he got was Yahya, John the Baptist, who we have talked about. Maryam alayhi salam, and this, by a lot of these verses you'll find in chapter 3 and some of them chapter 19. Chapter 3 is called Ale Imran, the family of Imran, the father of Maryam. And also chapter 19 is called Surah Maryam, the very famous verse, a chapter named after Maryam. The angels would visit Maryam. إذ قالت الملائكة يا مريم إن الله يبشرك بكلمة منه اسمه مسيح عيسى ابن مريم. Oh Maryam, the angels are talking to Maryam now. Allah gives you the glad tidings of a word, the word of God. And his name will be Al-Masih Isa ibn Maryam. Isa, the son of Maryam. Wajihan fi dunya wal akhirah. He's going to be notable in this world and the next. Apart from the fact that Maryam is being told that she was going to be a mother, even though no man had touched her, this shows the sanctity and the elevated status of Maryam, the fact that angels talked to her. And not only that, no woman in history could bear a child miraculously the way that Maryam did. Not only that, Maryam is surprised. Again in Surah Al-Imran, how can I have a son when no man has touched me? And she was told, this is the wish of Allah. Inna Allah astafaki wa tahharaki wa astafaki ala nisa'il alameen, she is told by the angels. O Maryam, Allah has chosen you and has purified you and has chosen you over all the women in this whole universe, not only on this earth. Wastafaki ala nisa'il alameen, in the whole universe. That was during her time, by the way, because we believe that the greatest woman of all was Hazrat Fatima alayhi salam. But in her time, Maryam was the most eminent woman. And let's not forget, this happened approximately just over 2,000 years ago, 600 years before the coming approximately of Hazrat Fatima alayhi salam. So chapter 19 in the Quran is named after Maryam, and that the existence was by the spirit that Allah breathed into Maryam, from whom Isa alayhi salam was born. Many of the reports, although the Quran does not confirm or deny it, many of the reports say that she, that is Maryam, did not show an obvious sign of any pregnancy. Some say that she was pregnant only for a few hours or for a few days, but not for the 9 months, because this was not normal pregnancy after all. But when she felt the pains of labor pains, childbirth, she went to the remote part of the city. Now it is identified as Bethlehem, Bethlehem is maybe, I would say, approximately 45 minutes, 1 hour's drive from Jerusalem. Bethlehem, the Church of Nativity is called the Church of Nativity. Today, and especially today, is celebrated. Although, of course, because of COVID now, there's very little celebration, but it is mentioned a place when the manger was. What we call manger is what we call a kind of a crib, if you like, where the baby rested. Of course, no, that was just a desert in those days. وَحُزِّيَ إِلَيْكِ بِجِزْءِ النَّخْلَةِ تُسَاقِطْ عَلَيْهِ رُطْبًا جَنِيًّا. When she felt, when Maryam felt the pains of childbirth, she was told, وَحُزِّيَ إِلَيْكِ بِجِزْءِ النَّخْلَةِ, then pull towards you the palm of the date tree. تُسَاقِطْ عَلَيْكِ رُطْبَةً جَنِيًّا, and the dates will come tumbling down. So that's another reason, as I said, for us to believe that she, that is Maryam, was actually born, Isa alayhi salam was born during that particular period, which is maybe spring or summer. And Maryam felt that pain. Ya laytani mittu qabli hadha wa kuntu nasiyan mansiya. That she said, I wish I was dead before this, and I would be something that was forgotten. You know why that is so important? Because it is reminding us, the men, something that we never experience, the pains of childbirth. And in many ways, we are almost oblivious to it. We don't even think about it. And the Quran is reminding us that not only women, not only all women, but even someone like eminent, like Maryam, went through it to the point that she said, I wish I was dead before this. She experienced the pains of childbirth. But once the child was born, Isa was brought to Jerusalem. And in those days, people used to fast. Nadar to Sauman. But they used to fast. Their fast was much more difficult than our fast today. Their fast was by not speaking. Believe me, not speaking is more difficult than not eating. You try not speaking in front of people for an hour or two, and you'll see how difficult it is. Inni nadaratu nazar sauman, that I have fasted, I have vowed a fast. And la ukalimun nasa salatha ayami sawiyan, that I will not speak to anybody for 3 days. This was the ayah that Maryam came. And when Maryam came with the child to the people in Jerusalem, now, as you can imagine, they were very surprised. How can she bring a child? And what is interesting is, again, this is recorded in the Quran, of what the people in Jerusalem said to Maryam. Because in the olden days, and to some degree even now, people always associate a child with the parents. That is, the parents are supposed to give the good values, cultivate proper values in the child. And they asked her, ما كانت أبوك امرأ سوء وما كانت أمك بغيا. O أخت Harun, or the sister of Harun, your father was not an evil person, and your mother was chaste. She was not somebody who was unchaste. Where did this child come from? What is interesting is that they draw the example of Maryam with her parents. Your parents were very good people. Your father was virtuous. Your mother was a very honest person. She was not unfaithful. Where did this child come from? فَأَشَارَتْ إِلَيْهِ. At that time, don't forget, Maryam could not speak because she was fasting. So she pointed to the child. قَالُوا كَيْفَ نُكَلِّبُ مَنْ كَانَ فِي الْمَهْدِ الصَّبِيَّةِ. How can we talk to a child who is in the cradle? Because basically Maryam, by pointing to the child, was telling them to ask the child. So how can we talk to a child? At that time, Isa speaks. قَالَ إِنِّي عَبْدُ اللَّهِ. As far as I understand, it was essential that Jesus speaks. Because if Maryam would have spoken, supposing she wasn't fasting, and she would have said that this is a miraculous child, nobody would have believed her. Imagine a young girl in our own community coming with a child that we know, as far as we know, she's not married, nobody has touched her, and suddenly saying, this is from Allah, a miraculous child. Nobody would have believed her. So it was essential for Jesus to speak so that he can save the chastity of his mother. Otherwise, people would have been pointing fingers at Maryam. Qala inni Abdullah. Not only does Jesus speak, but the words that he chooses, the ways that he speaks are quite amazing. He says, Inni Abdullah. Why are they so amazing words? Because simply by saying Inni Abdullah, Jesus destroys the doctrine of Trinity right there and then. He says, I'm not Allah. I'm not the son of Allah. I'm the Abdullah. I'm the servant of Allah. I'm not God. I'm not the son of God. I'm the servant of Allah. Inni Abdullah. Atani al-kitaba wa ja'alani nabiyyan. Allah has given me the book and made me a prophet. Notice he's made a prophet from childbirth, not at the age of 30 or 40. He's a prophet there. Yes, he did not preach until he was asked to. أعطاني الكتاب وجعلني نبيا وأوصاني بالصلاة والزكاة ما دمت حيا. And Allah has asked me to pray and to give the zakat. Notice the zakat until and as long as I am alive. This is Isa alayhi salam speaking in the Quran. And one of the things that he says, وَبِرٍ بِوَالِدَتِي, then I should be good to my mother. He couldn't say my parents because he did not have a father. What is important here is that sense of duty or compassion and complete obedience, not only to Allah, but also to the mother. And the Quran then continues about the life of Isa. We don't have the time to go into it because I want to turn to Hazrat Zainab also. But I want to also mention that in many ways, the Quran also replicates some of the stories, not all, told about Jesus. And maybe we can talk some other time about the problems of the account, the Gospels, the Christian Gospels, and why they are problematic for us, because we do believe that they are not accurate accounts of Jesus. The first miracle that Jesus performed in the Bible is what? He turns water into wine. Apparently, they went to a party. Jesus used to party, and they ran out of wine, and he turned abracadabra, water into wine. But that's not what the Quran says. The first miracle that Isa alayhi salam performs in the Quran is to save the chastity of his mother, Inni Abdullah, to speak from the cradle. And then there are many other miracles reported in the Quran that Isa alayhi salam used to perform. وَرَسُولًا إِلَى بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ, the Quran says. He was a prophet to the Banu Israel, the children of the Israelites. Israel by there was Yaqub. So Banu Israel refers to the children of Yaqub alayhi salam. إِنِّي قَدْ جِئْتُكُمْ بِآيَةٍ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ. I have come to you with an ayah, a sign from your Lord. إِنِّي أَخْلُقُ لَكُم مِّنَ الْتِينِ كَهِيَةِ الْطَيْرِ. I can create from mud, from clay, I can create a bird. وَأَنفُخُ فِيهِ, and I can breathe a spirit into the bird. بِإِذْنِ, but only with the permission of Allah. And that that's very important, a statement, by the permission of Allah. In other words, Isa does whatever he does because of the power of Allah within him. He wasn't Allah. He wasn't the son of Allah. He was a prophet of Allah. So because of the power, he can actually breathe spirit into birds. وَأُبْرِيُ الْأَكْمَى, and I can even cure those who are blind. وَالْأَبْرَص, and those who are leprosy, the lepers. وَأُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ, and I can even give life to those who are dead. بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ, by the power of Allah. And I can even tell you what you have eaten and what is in your homes and what you have hidden in your homes. Again, all بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. What does that tell us? It tells us, above all, the power of Allah, not only to create, but Allah can give those powers to whom he wishes of those who are the pious servants. We've seen, and there's a lot more that one can talk about. Isa alayhi salam, time is running short now, but there's a lot that one can talk about the power of Isa alayhi salam and the overwhelming powers that he had, the birth, the miraculous power, the things that he performed, and indeed, even the question of the so-called crucifixion that we do not accept. Let me turn in the few minutes that I have left to Hazrat Zainab, because Zainab alayhi salam was named by the Prophet. The Prophet himself had a daughter called Zainab, and he named her Zainab. And according, if you look at, dissect the word Zain and Ab, is the adornment of her father. She was an adornment to her father. We only think of Zainab alayhi salam as a heroine, or I should say, sheroine of Karbala. But she was alima ghayra muallama. She was an alim without being taught. In other words, she was learned without ever being taught by anybody. Indeed, Zainab alayhi salam was brought up in a very cultured, in a very educated environment. So even though she did not receive any formal schooling, she did not go to a madrasa, she was also a teacher. She would hold regular classes in Medina for women. And the subject that she would teach, fiqh, Islamic law, for example, the tafsir of the Quran, memorization of the Quran, statements of the hadith of the Prophet, and there are others, subject like Islamic ethics. Indeed, the local women would come to Zainab even though she was younger than them, to learn from her teachings and to emulate her manners and morals. One thing we learn about Zainab, Zainab Kubra as she's called, is that she was very eloquent in her speech. Her way of presenting things was from very much like her father. There are some people who are eloquent the way that they speak, and therefore, you remember the story that she stood up and spoke in Kufa and in Sham. And I don't want to recite them aside because this is a happy occasion. But you cannot separate Zainab from Kufa and Sham. The two are deeply linked. What is interesting is that when she starts speaking in the courtroom of Ibn Ziyad in Kufa, Ibn Ziyad turned and his surprise says, "Who is this woman speaking like that? Who is this woman?" And he is told that this is Zainab bint Ali, Zainab, the daughter of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And you know what Ibn Ziyad says? She speaks like her father. Her father used to speak like that because she was very eloquent and skillful in what she speaks. You see, my friends, there is a difference between a sword and a word. A sword pierces the skins, it pierces part of the body. They can heal, but the words pierce the hearts and souls of people, and they can have a deep impact on people. And therefore, the power of the language, the power of words is very, very great. The speech can actually create more power than the swords can. Because as I said, the skin can heal, but the hearts and the souls are implanted with certain values. And this was the power of Zainab in the way that she spoke. She was also called the Aqila, Aqila or Aqila of Banu Hashim, because she had the best qualities, the most nobility and pride of the family. When Imam Ali alayhi salam moved to Kufa, you remember that he moved to Kufa after the Battle of Jamal. Zainab moved there also, and he continued to have classes for women there, to the extent that we hear that when she was delivering a lecture in which she was giving tafsir of the Quran, tafsir of a particular ayah, that Allah hears and accepts the praise of one who praises him. Sami Allahu liman hamida. Sami Allahu liman hamida is a phrase from the Quran. And Imam Hussein, when he heard that, he was overhearing it. He was so very happy to hear his own sister giving the tafsir of the Quran. It shows us the level of intellect that Zainab alayhi salam had. One other point that we should note about Zainab is the question of compatibility, that a lot of people wanted to marry Zainab, But Imam Ali, with the permission of Zainab, chose Abdullah. Abdullah ibn Ja'far was actually the cousin of Zainab. Why Abdullah? Why not others? Because there is such a thing called kafa'a or kufu also, compatibility. That when you want to marry somebody, make sure that there is an element of compatibility. What was the compatibility between Abdullah and Zainab? Was that of chastity, of akhlaq, of piety. There was something about Abdullah that really pleased Imam Ali. He was called Bahrul Jud, that the sea of munificence, of compassion, of kindness. No person would go empty-handed if they came to Abdullah's home. Abdullah was very, very generous and very kind. The marriage of Zainab with Abdullah was very simple, even though Abdullah was quite reasonably well off. But Zainab demanded very little. She lived a life of modesty. A lot of the wealth was devoted for the poor. And as I said, he was called Bahrul Jud. And I want to end now. And again, I don't want to make anybody cry. But again, you cannot separate Zainab from Karbala. Because when she heard that Imam Hussein was headed towards Kufa, Zainab begged Abdullah that she wanted to go too. Because she was always very close to her brother. For 55 years, Hussein and Zainab were together. And Zainab says, I cannot go on my own. Let my brother go on his own. So Abdullah, not only he consented, he was not well, he could not go, but he even allowed his sons to accompany Zainab. Zainab alayhi salam insisted that my mother did not leave me behind to watch from afar, so I cannot be separated from my brother. We are aware of what happened in Karbala, and I do not want to go into the details, but Zainab was always seen in the context of the heroine of Karbala. Not only did she go with her brother, she was with her brother everywhere. Zainab is also a very saintly figure. And I want to end with this particular anecdote. It's a personal anecdote. I normally do not like to personalize these issues, but I would like to say this, that when I went to, it was in 1988, I remember. I went to Sham for Arba'in. It was very crowded. And as I entered the Haram, the lights went off. And somebody just screamed and shouted. And after a little while, the lights came on. And I asked, what happened? Why is this person shouting? He says, when this person came in the Haram, he couldn't speak. He was dumb. And now suddenly the power of speech has come to him. This was a personal experience. I had not met the person beforehand, but this is what I was told myself. A lot of people have experienced miracles at the Dharih of Hazrat Zainab in Damascus. And what does it tell us? Is the barakah, the power that when you are saintly, when you are pure, that barakah is not only when you are alive, but even after you die. It accompanies you. It doesn't leave you. That somehow, because of the barakah, the piety that you had, that Allah's blessings go from up there to the shrine, and anybody who goes near the shrine is able to touch those blessings. And therefore we go and hug and kiss the shrine. Not that because we like to kiss railings and iron. Nobody wants to kiss metal. But what is inside that metal and inside those railings, that's important. And I have seen this also. There are other Muslims who believe that Zainab is not buried in Damascus, that she is buried in Cairo. Now, whether she's buried in Damascus or Cairo is not the issue here. I've been to Cairo. And to my great surprise, the Bohra community, the Sunnis also, they go and they cry out to Zainab the way that we do in Damascus. So to say that this crying out and putting things in the shrine or, asking for the wasila of Zainab is a Shia invention is wrong. I have seen it with my own eyes. The Sunnis have done it in Egypt. The Bohras do it, other communities too. Because Zainab is too powerful a figure to be limited to space and time. Her barakah, her sanctity, her piety goes everywhere to anybody who reaches out to her. Whether she's buried in Damascus or in Egypt is not really that much important. What is important is the piety and the chastity and the complete love for Allah that Zainab alayhi salam had. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thank you for giving me this opportunity of addressing you. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Takim. It was a very insightful speech. We greatly appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. You honored me.
Thank you. Please recite the salawat for the health and well-being of Dr. Takim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Does any member of the community have question for Dr. Takim?
Yes, salam alaikum. May I ask a question? Dr. Takim, I'm sorry if I take more of your time and you have to leave.
No, go ahead.
Thank you for the information. It was very insightful. If you have had any dialogue or intellectual conversations with the Christian community, at least those who follow two of the Bibles who are referring to the coming of Messiah, Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wa the Barnabas and Yohanna Bibles. What kind of justification do you see from these communities in terms of continuing to be in Christianity and not to want to know at least more about Islam and be informed?
Well, as you are aware, there were many gospels at one time, not just 4. These were canonized. In other words, canonized means that they were recognized as official and correct much later on. Okay? And unfortunately, most Christians do not recognize the gospel that you are mentioning, although there were more than just the 4, but they do not accept them. I think part of the problem also is that we have not reached out to them. So what they know about Islam is what they hear from the media. And what they hear from the media is very negative. We need to reach out to them, and reach out to them is, as the Quran reminds us, that beautiful preaching. We should not go with it attitude that you are wrong and I'm right, because that will turn them away. But say good things about yourself rather than bad things about others, then they will be appealed and attracted to Islam. So yes, we can point out in a very proper way some of the problematic areas, which even the Christian scholars have mentioned, by the way. It's not only us. There are books written by Christians themselves to talk about the problems in the Gospels. As you are aware, they believe in 4 main Gospels, and 3 of them are called the synoptic Gospels. That is, they copied from each other. Most probably, Luke and Matthew copied from Mark, which is the original. So there's one Gospel which is completely different, which is the Gospel of John. But we can show them why we have issues with them, again, in a very polite and proper way. And I think that they would listen to us, but we have not been able to do this. A lot of them just believe because they're brought up to believe that way. Any more questions?
Okay. Thank you so much again, Dr. Takim, for the insightful speech and for your time. Brother Hadi, would you mind reciting the dua of Akhir Jalase?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Katim, for the insightful presentation. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadan wa ala Muhammad. ولا الأمر الذين فرست علينا طاعتهم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا خاتم النبيين ويا سيد المرسلين. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين يا علي بن أبي طالب ويا سيد المسيحيين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة يا بنت رسول الله يا سيدة نساء العالمين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، السلام عليك يا سيد الشهداء، يا ابن رسول الله، يا ابن أمير المؤمنين، يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء. السلام عليك وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء، السلام عليك يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء. السلطان يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن موسى الرضا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب الزمان، السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان ويا شريك القرآن ويا خليفة الرحمن. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك ورحمة الله وبركاته. برای سلامتی خودتون و for the health of the speaker and the community and the Imam of our time. رحم الله من يقرأ فاتحة مع الصلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Thank you, Brother Hadi.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Inshallah, you have a great weekend and great holidays. Bye.
Bye. Alaikum assalam.